Maya's face hit the dirt with a sickening thud. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison's boot pressed harder between her shoulder blades, grinding her cheek into the sand until she tasted blood. The laughter came from everywhere. 37 recruits who'd watched her fail for 19 days straight, who'd bet money on when she'd finally quit, who saw her as nothing more than a political checkbox that was wasting everyone's time. Morrison leaned down, his breath hot against her ear. This is what happens to weak little girls who think they can play soldier. Then Maya moved. One fluid twist, and suddenly Morrison was the one gasping for air, his face draining white as the woman he'd tortured for 3 weeks held him in a grip that could kill. The yard went dead silent. From which city are you watching this video today? If this story moves you, subscribe to hear more untold tales of hidden strength. Stay with me until the very end. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes. Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far Maya's story has traveled. Again! Morrison's voice cracked across the obstacle course like a whip. Move your ass, Chen, or so help me God I'll make you run it until you pass out. Maya's hands were already bleeding. The rope climb, her third attempt that morning, had stripped skin from her palms, left them raw and slick with blood that made every grip impossible. But she grabbed the rope anyway, pulled herself up 3 feet, 5 feet, and felt her hands slip. She hit the ground hard. Pathetic. Morrison walked toward her slowly, deliberately, making sure every recruit in the formation could hear him. 19 days. 19 days of this. You know how many spots you're taking up, Chen? How many real Marines could be here instead of you? Maya stayed on her knees, head down, shoulders shaking. From anyone else, it might have looked like crying, but her eyes, hidden from view, were calculating, cold, watching. On your feet, recruit. She stood slowly, unsteadily, made it look like effort. Morrison turned to address the formation. 37 recruits stood at attention, down from the 120 who'd started Marine Special Reconnaissance Selection 3 weeks ago. The strongest, fastest, most determined candidates in the Corps. And then there was Maya Chen, who couldn't climb a rope, who fell behind on every run, who looked like a stiff wind might knock her over. This, Morrison jabbed a finger toward Maya, is what happens when politicians run the military. When we prioritize diversity over capability. When we forget that the enemy doesn't give a damn about your feelings. A few recruits shifted uncomfortably. Most stayed stone-faced. But three watched Morrison with something other than agreement in their eyes. Corporal James Reeves, a Navy medic who'd cross-trained for reconnaissance, kept his gaze fixed forward, but his jaw tightened. He'd seen Maya's hands that morning, had watched her wrap them in medical tape that she'd stolen from the aid station because Morrison refused to let her get proper treatment. Pain builds character, Morrison had said. Maybe if it hurts enough, you'll quit. Private Sophia Ortega stood 2 rows back, her dark eyes tracking every movement. She'd grown up watching her mother clean houses for families who treated her like she was invisible. She recognized Morrison's tone. It was the same one those families had used, the absolute certainty that some people were simply worth less than others. Lance Corporal Derek Washington, 6'2" and built like the linebacker he'd been at Stanford, stared straight ahead. But his mind was working. He'd been raised by a father who'd taught him that strength meant protecting people, not dominating them. Morrison's version of leadership felt wrong in a way Washington couldn't quite articulate. Not yet. Reeves! Morrison's voice snapped, front and center. Reeves jogged forward, came to attention. You're a medic, right? Tell me, what happens to a team when one member can't keep up? Reeves knew the expected answer, knew what Morrison wanted him to say, but something in him rebelled. In the field, Sergeant, we adapt. We work as a team to accomplish the mission. Morrison's face darkened. Wrong answer, Corporal. In the field, weakness gets people killed. Dismissed. As Reeves returned to formation, Maya caught his eye for just a fraction of a second. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or solidarity. All right, ladies. Morrison clapped his hands together. Since Chen here needs extra motivation, we're all going to wait while she completes this obstacle course. No water, no shade, just standing here in the sun watching our diversity hire struggle. It was 94 degrees. The recruits had already been training for 6 hours. But no one moved. No one protested. Maya approached the rope again. Her hands were shaking. That part wasn't an act. The pain was real. She jumped, grabbed, pulled herself up 2 feet before her bloody hand slipped. She fell, got up, tried again, fell. "This is embarrassing," Morrison announced. "Someone time her. I want to document exactly how long it takes for her to realize she doesn't belong here." 15 minutes passed. Maya fell 7 more times. Some recruits looked away. Others watched with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. Morrison watched with satisfaction. Finally, on her 8th attempt, Maya made it to the top. It took her 4 minutes, twice as long as the slowest male recruit. When she came down, her hands were destroyed, blood dripping onto the sand. "Congratulations, Chen." Morrison's voice dripped sarcasm. "You completed 1 obstacle, only 12 more to go. Think you can manage that before sunset?" "Yes, Sergeant." "What was that? I can't hear weakness." "Yes, Sergeant." Maya's voice cracked. "Perfect," Morrison smiled. "Then get moving." The afternoon sun was brutal when Morrison announced the next training evolution. Hand-to-hand combat. The recruits paired off quickly, instinctively, falling into the hierarchy that had developed over 3 weeks of shared suffering. No one approached Maya. "Looks like Chen doesn't have a partner." Morrison's tone was mock concern. "Holloway, front and center." Marcus "Tank" Holloway stepped forward. 6'4", 240 pounds of muscle. Former MMA fighter who'd enlisted after a knockout loss ended his professional career. He was good at 2 things: hitting people and following orders. "You'll be demonstrating with Chen today." Tank glanced at Maya, then back at Morrison. "Sergeant, she's what, Holloway? A Marine recruit, same as you? Or are you saying she deserves special treatment?" The trap was obvious. Tank's face hardened. "No, Sergeant." "Good. Everyone gather around. Watch carefully." The recruits formed a circle. Maya stood in the center, her small frame looking even smaller next to Tank. Morrison walked the perimeter like a referee, but there was nothing impartial about his expression. "Today we're practicing takedowns and control holds. The objective is to neutralize your opponent safely but decisively. However," Morrison paused for effect, "in the field the enemy won't go easy on you because of your size or gender. So today we train realistically. Holloway, maximum force. Chen, your job is simple. Survive for 30 seconds. From the headquarters building 200 yards away, Captain Luis Mendoza watched through binoculars. Next to him stood Brigadier General Patricia Hawkins, arms crossed, face unreadable. "He's going to hurt her," Mendoza said quietly. "That's the point," Hawkins replied. "We need to see how far he'll go. And if he goes too far, then we intervene." But Hawkins' hand didn't move toward her radio. Not yet. The first takedown happened fast. Tank grabbed Maya by the collar and belt, lifted her off the ground, and slammed her down with enough force to knock the air from her lungs. She hit hard, the impact sending a cloud of dust up around her body. By training protocol, she slapped the ground to disperse the impact. It didn't help much. "Get up, Chen," Morrison barked. Maya struggled to her feet, moving slowly. Her breathing was labored. Real or performance? At this point, even she wasn't sure where the act ended and genuine pain began. "Again!" Tank hesitated for just a moment. Maya's eyes met his, and something in that gaze unsettled him. She didn't look afraid. She looked patient, like she was waiting for something. The second takedown was worse. Tank swept her legs and followed her down, driving his shoulder into her midsection with his full weight. The crack of impact made several recruits wince. Blood appeared at the corner of Maya's mouth. "Keep going," Morrison encouraged. "This is reality, no mercy." Sofia Ortega's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She'd been silent for 19 days, watching Morrison's escalating abuse, telling herself it wasn't her place to interfere. But this was different. "Sergeant," she started, "shut your mouth, Ortega, unless you want to volunteer for the next demonstration." Sofia fell silent, but her eyes met Reeves across the circle. Something unspoken passed between them. A line was being crossed. Tank pulled Maya up for the third time. She was bleeding from her mouth, favoring her left side, moving like every breath hurt. And still those eyes, calm, calculating, watching. "Problem, Holloway?" Morrison noticed Tank's hesitation. "No, Sergeant." "Then finish her." Tank grabbed Maya's arm, spun her around for a rear takedown. For just a second, his grip loosened, an instinctive mercy he couldn't quite suppress. Maya felt it, filed it away. This one had conscience. That was important. The takedown drove her face first into the dirt. Tank held her there, his weight on her back, pinning her completely. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This was the protocol, demonstrating complete control. "Time," Morrison called. 30 seconds. "Holloway, you pass." "Chen." He walked over, stood above them. "You failed. Again." Tank released her and backed away, looking uncomfortable. Maya stayed on the ground, coughing, blood and dirt mixing on her face. "On your feet, recruit." She got up slowly, swaying. Morrison turned to address the gathered recruits. "This is the difference between sentiment and reality. In here, we can pretend everyone's equal. In the field, the enemy will target the weak. They will exploit any vulnerability. And weakness," he jabbed a finger at Maya, "gets good Marines killed." Washington spoke up, his voice measured but firm. "With respect, Sergeant, Marines have always succeeded because we adapt and overcome, not because we abandon each other." The yard went silent. No one interrupted Morrison. Ever. Morrison turned slowly, fixing Washington with a stare that had made grown men flinch. "You questioning my methods, Lance Corporal?" Washington met his eyes. "No, Sergeant, just offering perspective." "Perspective." Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Tell you what, Washington, since you're so full of wisdom, you can join Chen for extra PT tonight. Maybe you'll learn the difference between perspective and insubordination." Washington's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Yes, Sergeant." Morrison turned back to the group. "Anyone else want to share their perspective? Anyone else think Chen belongs here?" Silence, heavy and damning. "That's what I thought. All right, one more demonstration. And since this is taking so long, I'll do it myself. Show you all how it's done when you stop being soft." Morrison stepped into the circle. Maya stood across from him, blood still trickling from her lip, dirt caked on her face. She looked broken, finished, exactly like Morrison wanted her to look. "Listen up," Morrison's voice carried across the yard. "Sometimes trash needs to know its place. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is help someone realize they don't belong." He moved toward Maya with predatory confidence. She didn't back away, didn't flinch, just stood there, waiting. Morrison grabbed her by the collar and shoulder, same technique Tank had used. But Morrison's grip was different, personal, vindictive. He wanted to hurt her, wanted to humiliate her, wanted to break whatever stubborn pride kept her here day after day, failing and bleeding and refusing to quit. "This is what happens in the real world," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No second chances, no mercy, just—" He drove her face into the dirt with unnecessary force, using his full body weight. Her head hit hard enough that several recruits flinched. Morrison pressed his knee into her back, pushing her face deeper into the earth, grinding it in. Just reality, he finished. The recruits stood frozen. This had gone beyond training. Everyone knew it, but no one moved. In the headquarters building, Captain Mendoza grabbed his radio. "General, we need to—" "Wait," Hawkins ordered. Her eyes were locked on something in the training yard, something that made her lean forward suddenly. "Look at her hand." Through the binoculars, Mendoza saw it. Maya's fingers, splayed in the dirt, were moving. Not struggling, moving deliberately, forming a pattern. "Oh my God," he whispered. "She's signaling." Morrison was still talking, playing to his audience. "This is what happens when you're too weak, too stubborn, too stupid to realize—" He stopped. Something had changed beneath his grip. Maya's body, which had been limp and broken, suddenly felt different, coiled, ready. "Sergeant!" Mendoza's voice cracked over Morrison's radio. "Stand down! Stand down now!" But it was too late. Maya moved. The transformation was instant and terrifying. 1 second she was pinned and helpless. The next she was liquid motion, twisting beneath Morrison's weight with serpentine precision, capturing his extended arm, using his own momentum and leverage against him. Morrison found himself airborne, then slammed onto his back, the wind knocked out of him. Before he could process what happened, Maya had him in a blood choke, her forearm across his carotid artery, her other hand behind his head, applying pressure with surgical accuracy. He struggled. Trained combat instructor, 6'2", 200 pounds, fighting with everything he had. It didn't matter. Maya adjusted her grip with minimal effort, cutting off blood flow to his brain. His face reddened, then paled. His movements became desperate, uncoordinated. The entire yard stood frozen in shock. The woman they'd mocked for 19 days, the one who couldn't climb a rope, who fell behind on every run, who looked like she might break if you sneezed on her, had just taken down one of the most feared instructors in the Marine Corps in less than 2 seconds. Maya held the choke for exactly 3 more seconds, long enough to prove absolute dominance, short enough to avoid permanent damage. Then she released him. Morrison collapsed to his knees, gasping, hands at his throat, face still pale from oxygen deprivation. He looked up at Maya with confusion, then growing horror, as he processed what had just happened. Maya stood over him. Her posture had changed completely. No more slouching, no more weakness, no more fear. She stood like she'd been born to command, shoulders back, spine straight, every movement controlled and purposeful. When she turned to scan the assembled recruits, her eyes were different. Sharp, predatory, aware. Captain Mendoza appeared at the edge of the training yard, moving fast. Behind him came General Hawkins, her stride measured but commanding. The recruits parted for them automatically. Mendoza stopped 3 paces from Maya and snapped to attention. What he said next was in a language none of the recruits recognized. Pashto, one of several languages Maya spoke fluently. Nightshade protocol verified. Status report. Maya responded in the same language, her accent perfect. Asset secure. Evaluation complete. Subject Morrison has violated 18 protocols, including assault, hazing, discrimination, and abuse of authority. Mendoza saluted her. The gesture sent shockwaves through the assembled recruits. A captain saluting a recruit? Then General Hawkins stepped forward. "Attention!" Her voice cut through the confusion like a blade. Every recruit snapped to position, including Morrison, who was still on his knees, trying to understand what was happening. "You are in the presence of Lieutenant Colonel Maya Chen," Hawkins announced. "Distinguished Service Cross recipient, Silver Star, 3 Bronze Stars with Valor, former Delta Force operator with 47 successful classified missions. Currently assigned to Marine Corps Special Operations Command, Office of the Inspector General." The words hung in the air. Impossible words. The weak recruit who couldn't make it 3 weeks was actually a lieutenant colonel, one of the most elite operators in the military. Morrison's face drained of all remaining color. Lieutenant Colonel Chen was not a recruit, Hawkins continued, her voice carrying absolute authority. She was conducting an evaluation of this training program under Operation Integrity Forge, a classified investigation into special operations training protocols across all service branches. Maya finally spoke, her voice completely different from the hesitant, quiet tone she'd used for 19 days. Clear, commanding, with natural authority that needed no volume to be heard. For the past 3 weeks, I have observed not your physical performance, but your character. How you treat others when you believe no one who matters is watching. How you respond to perceived weakness. Whether you define strength as dominating others or protecting them. She let her gaze move across the formation, making eye contact with recruit after recruit. Some couldn't meet her eyes. Others stared back, faces pale with realization. 3 of you demonstrated the qualities Marine Special Operations actually needs. Maya's voice softened slightly. Corporal Reeves, when you thought no one was watching, you helped injured teammates without seeking recognition. You treated medical needs as priorities, not excuses. Private Ortega, you defended others against bullying when it would have been easier to join in. You put principle above popularity. Lance Corporal Washington, you consistently prioritized team success over personal glory, and you had the courage to question unethical orders. The 3 stood at attention, processing that they'd been singled out. The rest of you, Maya's voice hardened again, spent 3 weeks confusing cruelty for strength, mistaking abuse for discipline, following orders you knew were wrong because it was easier than standing up. She turned to Morrison, who was finally struggling to his feet. And you, Gunnery Sergeant, you believe breaking people makes them stronger. You think leadership means domination. You've confused your trauma with wisdom and your cruelty with toughness. Morrison found his voice, hoarse from the blood choke. This is a setup, entrapment. You can't. I can, Maya cut him off. And I did. Every action you took was documented, recorded, and evaluated. You crossed the line from challenging recruits to abusing them approximately 47 times over the past 3 weeks. You endangered lives. You violated the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And you proved exactly what we suspected, that this program has been corrupted from the inside. General Hawkins stepped forward again. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison, you are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Report to my office in 30 minutes. Captain Mendoza will escort you. Morrison looked around wildly, searching for support. This is political correctness run amok. We're creating warriors, not social workers. You're creating liability, Hawkins replied coldly. The real warriors don't need to break people to lead them. Dismissed, Sergeant. As Mendoza led Morrison away, the man still protesting, still refusing to accept what had happened, Maya turned back to the stunned recruits. Operation Integrity Forge is evaluating 8 special operations training programs simultaneously, she explained. Officers like me, selected because we don't fit the stereotypical operator profile, have been embedded as recruits. Our mission: determine whether these programs produce the leaders our military actually needs, or just produce people who are good at inflicting pain. Reeves spoke up, his voice hesitant. Ma'am, how long has this been going on? 6 months, and the results have been consistent. Programs that emphasize physical toughness at the expense of ethical judgment are producing operators who succeed in training but fail in the field, who can fight but can't think, who mistake aggression for leadership. Washington raised his hand, waited for Maya's nod. What happens now, ma'am? Now? You 3 continue to the Special Operations Qualification course. The others, Maya paused, you'll be reassigned, not as punishment necessarily, but as redirection. Some of you have potential, but need to re-examine your understanding of what strength actually means. She dismissed the formation, keeping only Reeves, Ortega, and Washington behind. As the others filed away, some looking relieved, others angry, most just confused. Maya's posture relaxed slightly. The three of you have a choice to make, she told them. Continue through standard training or join Operation Integrity Forge. Help us identify and reform toxic leadership across special operations. What would that entail, ma'am? Ortega asked. Eventually, assignments similar to what I just completed. Going undercover to evaluate whether units are building ethical leaders or just creating skilled thugs. Reeves looked troubled. That's asking us to spy on our fellow Marines. No, Maya corrected him. It's asking you to ensure that Marines are being led by people who deserve that responsibility. Big difference. Why us? Washington asked. Maya smiled slightly. Because you showed the qualities that matter most when you thought no one important was watching. That's the purest test of character I know. And that's what we need. People whose character doesn't change based on who's in the room. She gave them 24 hours to decide. As they left, still processing everything that had happened, Maya stood alone in the training yard where she'd been humiliated, beaten, and broken for 3 weeks. The blood on her face was real. The pain in her ribs was real. The torn skin on her hands was real. But so was the satisfaction of watching Morrison being led away in disgrace. General Hawkins approached, stood beside her in silence for a moment. How many more? Maya asked quietly. How many more bases? How many more Morrisons? 7 more facilities scheduled for evaluation, Hawkins replied. But after what happened at Fort Campbell last month, after the trainee suicide, we're running out of time. Congress is asking questions. The media is circling. Maya nodded, still watching the empty training yard. Morrison has allies. This isn't over. No, Hawkins agreed. It's just beginning. Colonel Blackwood has already filed complaints with 3 congressional committees. He's framing this as an attack on military tradition. Good. Maya finally looked at the general. Let them come. Because the thing about tradition is that it only deserves respect if it's worth preserving. And a tradition of abuse? That's just institutional cruelty with better PR. Hawkins smiled slightly. Your father would be proud. My father, Maya said softly, would tell me this is the easy part. Exposing Morrison is simple. Changing the culture that created him, that's the real fight. As the sun set over Fort Ironside, Maya walked back toward headquarters. Her hands still hurt. Her ribs still ached. The humiliation of 19 days being treated as worthless still stung. But she'd gotten what she came for. Evidence, documentation, proof that the problem was real and systemic, not just isolated incidents. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tonight, she allowed herself one moment of satisfaction, remembering Morrison's face when he realized the woman he'd tormented for weeks was actually the one evaluating him. Power reveals, always. And Morrison had revealed exactly who he was. Now it was time to make sure he, and others like him, faced the consequences. The briefing room felt smaller than it was. Reeves, Ortega, and Washington sat across from Maya, their uniforms still dusty from the training yard, minds still processing what they'd witnessed an hour ago. Maya had changed into her proper uniform, oak leaves on her collar, ribbons covering her chest. The transformation was complete. You 3 look like you've seen a ghost, Maya said, pouring water into 4 glasses. Her hands, still bandaged from the rope climbs, moved with practiced efficiency. Ma'am, with respect, Reeves started, you can speak freely here. This room is secured. How much of it was real? Ortega asked. The failures, the struggling, how much was performance? Maya sat down, met each of their eyes. The pain was real. Every fall, every humiliation, every drop of blood. I needed Morrison to believe I was weak, which meant actually enduring what a weak recruit would endure. You let him abuse you for 3 weeks. Washington's voice carried something between admiration and horror. I documented him abusing his authority for 3 weeks, Maya corrected. There's a difference. And before you ask, Yes, I could have stopped him any time, but stopping him wasn't the mission. Exposing him was. Captain Mendoza entered, carrying a tablet and 3 folders. General Hawkins sends her apologies. She's dealing with the fallout. Morrison's already retained a lawyer. Of course he has. Maya accepted the tablet, scanned it quickly. Her expression darkened. He's claiming entrapment, gender bias, and conspiracy to destroy his career. Can he make that stick? Reeves asked. He can try. That's where you 3 come in. Maya slid the folders across the table. Inside, you'll find the full scope of Operation Integrity Forge. What we're doing, why we're doing it, and what we're asking you to do. Ortega opened hers first, started reading. Her eyes widened. This is happening at 8 facilities? Simultaneously? Was happening, Mendoza corrected. Fort Ironside was the last evaluation. The others wrapped up over the past 4 months. And the results? Washington asked. Maya's jaw tightened. Consistent with what you witnessed here. Toxic leadership has metastasized throughout special operations training. We're producing operators who are physically capable but ethically compromised, who confuse dominance with strength, who see compassion as weakness. That's a strong accusation, ma'am, Reeves said carefully. It's a documented fact, Corporal. In the past 5 years, special operations units have seen a 340% increase in leadership incidents. That includes hazing deaths, training accidents from reckless behavior, mission failures due to poor judgment, and personnel losses because good people refuse to serve under toxic commanders. The number hung in the air. 340%. Jesus, Washington breathed. It gets worse. Maya pulled up files on the tablet, turned it so they could see. These are after-action reports from the past 2 years. Redacted, but you'll get the picture. Mission compromised because a team leader prioritized aggression over tactics. Civilian casualties because an operator couldn't distinguish between enemy combatants and bystanders. Intelligence opportunities lost because subjects died under interrogation that crossed the line. Ortega's hand trembled slightly as she scrolled through the reports. These are our people doing this? These are people trained by instructors like Morrison, Maya said. People taught that the only thing that matters is being the toughest, the meanest, the most aggressive. We've been selecting for the wrong qualities and wondering why our operators are making catastrophic decisions in the field. Mendoza leaned against the wall, arms crossed. General Hawkins has been tasked with implementing a complete overhaul. Fort Ironside is critical because Morrison has political protection. His commanding officer, Colonel Richard Blackwood, has friends in Congress, allies at the Pentagon, and a reputation as a warrior's warrior. Let me guess, Washington said. He thinks we're soft. He thinks we're destroying military readiness in the name of political correctness, Maya replied. And in about, she checked her watch, 90 minutes, he's going to walk into General Hawkins' office and make that case very forcefully. What do you need from us? Reeves asked. Maya studied them. The truth is, I don't know yet. Operation Integrity Forge has exposed the problem. Now we need to fix it. That means identifying which instructors need to be removed, which programs need to be reformed, and which operators need additional training in ethical decision-making. You want us to spy on our fellow Marines? Ortega said flatly. No, Maya's voice was firm. I want you to ensure Marines are being led by people who deserve that responsibility. I want you to help build a special operations community where strength doesn't require cruelty, where toughness doesn't exclude judgment, where being the best means more than just being the most ruthless. That's a nice speech, ma'am, Washington said, but how does it actually work? Mendoza took over. Initially, you'd complete an accelerated qualification course. 6 weeks instead of 6 months, focused on the essentials. Then you'd be assigned to operational teams as junior operators. On paper, you're just new guys. In reality, you'd be observing team dynamics, leadership styles, decision-making processes. And reporting back, Reeves said. And reporting back, Mendoza confirmed. But not constantly. not over every little thing. We're looking for patterns, systemic problems, leaders who are creating the next generation of toxic operators. What if we find them? Ortega asked. Then we document it, build a case, and remove them. Maya's tone left no room for doubt. Same as we did with Morrison, but quietly, professionally, without destroying careers unnecessarily. And if they fight back? Washington pressed. Maya smiled grimly. They will fight back. They'll call it a witch hunt. They'll claim we're prioritizing feelings over combat effectiveness. They'll say we're destroying military tradition, and we'll prove them wrong by showing that our reformed operators outperform theirs in every metric that matters. A knock interrupted them. A young Marine stuck his head in. "Ma'am, Colonel Blackwood has arrived. He's requesting an immediate meeting with General Hawkins." "Ahead of schedule," Mendoza muttered. "That's not good." Maya stood. "You three, think about what we've discussed. You have 24 hours to decide. This isn't an order, it's an invitation. Whatever you choose, your careers won't suffer." "And if we say yes," Reeves asked, "then your lives get complicated in ways you can't predict, but you'll be part of something that actually matters." Maya headed for the door, then paused. "One more thing. If you join us, you can never tell anyone what you're really doing. Not teammates, not friends, not family. You'll be living a cover story for months, maybe years. That kind of secret has a weight. Make sure you can carry it." After they left, Washington turned to the others. "What do you think?" Ortega was staring at her folder, at the reports of mission failures and preventable deaths. "I think my father died because his team leader cared more about looking tough than keeping his people alive. I think if this program had existed 12 years ago, maybe he'd still be here." "Sophia," Reeves started. "I'm not being emotional, James. I'm being practical. Morrison almost killed Chen today. He definitely broke that recruit who washed out last week, the one who tried to hang himself in the barracks. How many more before we say enough?" Reeves nodded slowly. "When you put it that way." "What about you, Derek?" Ortega asked. "You've been quiet." Washington was reading through the operational reports, his face troubled. "I'm thinking about the teams I'll be assigned to, the operators I'll be evaluating. These are people who'll trust me, depend on me, and I'll be secretly judging whether they deserve their positions." "Does that bother you?" Reeves asked. "Hell yes, it bothers me. But you know what bothers me more? The idea that we keep producing leaders like Morrison because no one has the courage to say the system is broken." Washington closed his folder. "I'm in, whatever it takes." Ortega nodded. "Me too." They both looked at Reeves. The medic was staring at his hands, thinking. Finally, he spoke. "I became a corpsman to save lives, not just in combat, everywhere. If this is how I do that, then I don't have a choice, do I?" "There's always a choice," Ortega said gently. "Then I choose to try to fix this." Reeves met their eyes. "All in?" "All in," Washington confirmed. "All in," Ortega agreed. None of them knew it yet, but that moment, 3 junior Marines deciding to trust a system that was asking them to do something uncomfortable in service of something important, would become the foundation of everything that followed. Across the base in General Hawkins' office, Colonel Richard Blackwood was making his case with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. "This is persecution, General, pure and simple. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison is a decorated Marine with 3 combat tours, and you're destroying his career because he hurt someone's feelings?" Hawkins sat behind her desk, expression neutral. Maya stood to the side, letting the general handle this, for now. "Colonel, Morrison trained recruits the way Marines have been trained for decades, the way I was trained, the way you were trained." Blackwood jabbed a finger at Hawkins. "We survived it. It made us stronger." "Did it?" Maya's quiet question cut through Blackwood's momentum. "Or did it just teach us to accept abuse as normal?" Blackwood turned on her, eyes cold. "And you are?" "Lieutenant Colonel Chen, Office of the Inspector General." The plant, the spy who pretended to be weak, the evaluator who documented systemic violations of the UCMJ, Maya corrected. Would you like to see the evidence, Colonel? I have 47 documented incidents of abuse, hazing, discrimination, and assault. With video. Blackwood's face reddened. You're proud of yourself? Setting up a good Marine? I'm proud of exposing a dangerous instructor before he killed someone, Maya replied evenly. Like he almost did 2 months ago when recruit Daniel Price tried to hang himself after Morrison told him he was worthless and should save everyone the trouble. Price was weak. Price is in therapy, recovering from a traumatic brain injury sustained during Morrison's training. Maya pulled out a file, slid it across Hawkins' desk. That's his medical report. The psychiatrist's evaluation explicitly states that Morrison's abuse triggered a psychotic break. Price will never serve again. And that's on Morrison. Blackwood grabbed the file, scanned it. His expression flickered, just for a second, with something that might have been doubt, but it hardened again quickly. One incident doesn't invalidate an entire program. You're right, Hawkins said, which is why we evaluated 8 facilities over 6 months. The results are consistent. Programs led by instructors like Morrison produce operators who excel at violence but fail at judgment. They win training exercises and lose actual missions because they can't adapt, can't think, can't see past their conditioning that aggression solves everything. That's bureaucratic bullshit, General. That's operational data, Colonel. Hawkins pulled up a presentation on her computer, turned the screen toward him. These are performance evaluations from the past 3 years. Units with ethical, psychologically intelligent leadership have 67% higher mission success rates than units led by traditional warrior culture commanders. Blackwood stared at the data. That can't be right. It's right, Maya said. We ran the numbers 4 times. The correlation is undeniable. Operators trained under reform protocols are more effective in the field because they can think, adapt, and make decisions that don't create more problems than they solve. This is politics, Blackwood said, but his voice had lost its certainty. You're cherry-picking data to justify a predetermined conclusion. We're following evidence wherever it leads, Hawkins corrected, and it leads to the conclusion that our training has been broken for years. We just didn't want to admit it. Blackwood stood abruptly. I'm filing a formal complaint with the Commandant, with the Secretary of Defense, with every congressional committee that will listen. You can't destroy a Marine's career based on some academic study about feelings. We're destroying Morrison's career based on documented criminal behavior, Maya said quietly. But by all means, make this public, because the evidence we have, it tells a story the American people need to hear. After Blackwood stormed out, Hawkins turned to Maya. You know he'll make good on that threat. He has allies. So do we, Maya replied, and ours have something his don't. What's that? The truth. And eventually, the truth wins. It just takes time. We might not have time, Hawkins warned. The Secretary is getting pressure from Congress. There are people in Washington who think special operations should be exempt from normal ethical constraints, that we need warriors, not social workers. Then we show them that the best warriors are the ones with ethical constraints, Maya said. The ones who can choose violence but don't have to rely on it. The ones who understand that strength without wisdom is just destruction. Hawkins smiled slightly. Your father used to say something similar. My father also used to say that the hardest battles are fought against people on your own side. Maya looked out the window toward the training yard. He was right about that too. 24 hours later, Reeves, Ortega, and Washington returned to the briefing room. Maya knew their answer before they spoke. She could read it in their posture, their expressions, the way they'd already begun to carry themselves with new purpose. We're in, Reeves said simply. All 3 of you? Maya asked, giving them one last chance to reconsider. All 3, Ortega confirmed. But we have questions. Ask. Washington went first. What happens if we encounter situations where the right thing to do isn't clear, where the line between challenging training and abuse is subjective? Then you document everything and let us analyze it, Maya replied. You're not judges, you're witnesses. Your job is to observe and report, not to make final determinations. What if we're ordered to do something we think crosses the line? Reeves asked. Then you follow your conscience, Maya said firmly. This program only works if you maintain your integrity. If you're asked to participate in something that feels wrong, you refuse. Politely, professionally, but firmly. Your cover story includes the fact that you're still new, still learning. Use that. Ortega's question was harder. What if we fail? What if we miss something important, or misread a situation, or... Then we learn from it, Maya interrupted gently. This isn't about perfection, Sophia. It's about trying to do better than we've done before. You'll make mistakes. We all will. The question is whether we learn from them or repeat them. Mendoza entered with new folders. Your training starts tomorrow. Accelerated timeline, intense schedule. You'll be learning in 6 weeks what normally takes 6 months. Some things will be compressed. Some will be skipped entirely, but by the end, you'll be qualified, and you'll be ready for your assignments. Where are we going? Washington asked. Ortega, you're headed to 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion in Okinawa. Washington, you'll join 2nd Marine Raider Battalion at Camp Lejeune. Reeves, you're staying here at Ironside, assigned to 1st Special Operations Battalion under a commander we're currently investigating. Reeves's eyes widened. That's the hardest assignment. That's why it's yours, Maya said. You demonstrated the strongest moral courage during the evaluation. You helped injured recruits when no one was watching. You kept detailed notes about Morrison's violations without being asked. You have instincts we need. What if I'm discovered? Then you'll be reassigned and we'll find another way. Maya's voice was calm, reassuring. But Reeves, you won't be discovered. Because you're not pretending to be something you're not. You're just being a good Marine who happens to be observing whether your leaders deserve to lead. That's not a cover story. That's just being conscious. The 6 weeks that followed were brutal, but purposeful. Every morning started at 04:30 with advanced combat training. Maya pushed them harder than Morrison ever had, but with a crucial difference. Every exercise had a clear purpose. Every challenge had a specific lesson. Every failure was analyzed for teaching value rather than used as ammunition for humiliation. Why did that ambush fail, Washington? Maya asked after one tactical scenario went sideways. I prioritized speed over security, ma'am. Walked right into their kill zone. Why? Washington thought carefully. Because I was thinking like an individual operator instead of a team leader. I saw the objective and forgot about the people depending on me. Good. Remember that feeling. Because you'll see commanders make that same mistake in the field, except with real lives at stake. And when you do, you'll know why it matters. The training wasn't just physical. Evenings were spent studying psychology, ethical decision-making, leadership theory, interrogation resistance, cover story maintenance, and the art of observation without detection. Maya brought in experts, psychologists who specialized in moral injury, former operators who'd witnessed toxic leadership, chaplains who'd counseled troops broken by abuse. One night, Maya invited 3 men into the classroom, former recruits. 2 had washed out of Morrison's program. 1 had barely survived it. The 3rd man was Daniel Price, the one who'd tried to hang himself. Tell them, Maya said gently. Price's hands shook as he spoke. Morrison told me I was worthless, that I'd get real Marines killed, that I should do everyone a favor and quit, or better yet, make sure I couldn't come back. Ortega's eyes filled with tears. Reeves's jaw clenched. Washington looked like he wanted to hit something. I believed him, Price continued. I thought if a Marine like Morrison said I was worthless, it must be true. So I tried to... His voice broke. I tried to fix the problem. Permanently. You survived, Maya said softly. And you're here because these three need to understand what's at stake. This isn't abstract. This isn't politics. This is about real people whose lives are destroyed by leaders who mistake cruelty for strength. After Price and the others left, Reeves spoke up. How do we prevent that from happening again? By recognizing the warning signs, Maya replied. By documenting the patterns. By making sure that when someone like Morrison crosses the line, there are consequences, every time, without exception. On the final day of training, Maya took them back to the clearing where her father had taught her. The stone marker still stood, partially hidden by vegetation. True strength protects. My father believed that power without compassion becomes tyranny, Maya explained. That the strongest warriors aren't those who dominate others, but those who protect them. You three are about to join operational teams. Some will share this philosophy, others won't. Your job is to figure out which is which and to make sure the right people know the difference. How do we handle resistance? Ortega asked. The same way I handled Morrison. You appear to yield until the moment comes to stand firm. You let them underestimate you. And when they reveal who they truly are, you make sure the right people are watching. The next morning, General Hawkins presided over a small, private ceremony. She pinned qualification badges on 3 uniforms, shook 3 hands, and looked each of them in the eye. What you're about to do requires courage most people can't imagine, she said. You'll be living double lives, making impossible judgments, often without guidance. But you were chosen because you already demonstrated the qualities we need when you thought no one was watching. Trust yourselves, trust each other, and trust that what you're doing matters. She handed each of them a sealed envelope. Your orders. You deploy separately in 72 hours. On paper, you're newly qualified operators. In reality, you're the vanguard of the most important reform in special operations history. After the ceremony, Maya met with each of them privately one final time. To Ortega, your father would be proud. You're making sure his death wasn't meaningless. To Washington, use your size. Let them underestimate your intelligence because they see an athlete. It's worked for you before. To Reeves, trust your instincts. You were right about Morrison from the beginning. You'll be right about others too. As they prepared to leave, Washington asked the question they'd all been thinking. Ma'am, what happens to you now? Maya smiled grimly. I get the hardest assignment of all. I'm joining Colonel Blackwood's 7th Special Operations Group, under his direct command. That's suicide, Ortega breathed. That's justice, Maya corrected. Blackwood is the bigger fish. Morrison was just following the culture Blackwood created. If we want real change, we need to prove that even the protected, the connected, the untouchable commanders face consequences when they create toxic environments. He'll be watching you, Reeves warned. Let him watch, Maya said. I've had plenty of practice being underestimated. She walked them to the transport vehicles, shook each hand one final time, and watched them drive away toward their new assignments. 3 junior operators carrying a secret that could change everything. Behind her, General Hawkins approached. Are they ready? As ready as they can be, Maya replied. The real test comes in the field. And you, ready for Blackwood? Maya thought about Morrison, about Price, about all the operators broken by leaders who mistook cruelty for strength. I've been preparing for this my entire career, General. Blackwood just doesn't know it yet. He will soon enough. Hawkins handed Maya her orders. And when he does, he'll fight back with everything he has. He's already scheduled congressional testimony for next month. He's calling it an attack on military readiness. Then I guess we'd better make sure we have proof he's wrong, Maya said quietly. As the sun set over Fort Ironside, Maya returned to her quarters to pack. Tomorrow she'd report to 7th Special Operations Group as their newest staff officer. Blackwood thought he was getting a political appointee he could marginalize and ignore. He had no idea he was getting the woman who'd just taken down his protege, who'd endured 3 weeks of abuse to document every violation, who was willing to do whatever it took to prove that true strength didn't require cruelty. Morrison had underestimated her. Blackwood was about to make the same mistake, and by the time he realized his error, it would be too late. Maya's first day at 7th Special Operations Group started with Colonel Blackwood keeping her waiting for 3 hours outside his office. A power move, transparent and petty, but effective. Every operator who walked past stared at the female lieutenant colonel sitting alone in the hallway, clearly being punished for something. Finally, Blackwood's aide opened the door. "The colonel will see you now." Blackwood didn't stand when she entered, didn't salute, just looked up from his paperwork with an expression that said she was wasting his time. "Lieutenant Colonel Chen, welcome to 7th Group." His tone made it clear she was anything but welcome. "I assume you know why you're here, to serve in whatever capacity you deem appropriate, sir." "Let's cut the bullshit." Blackwood leaned back in his chair. "You're here because General Hawkins thinks putting you under my command will prove some point about reformed leadership. You're a political statement, and I'm stuck with you." Maya said nothing. Let him talk. "You destroyed Morrison's career. A good Marine who trained operators the way they need to be trained. Hard. Without mercy, because that's what the battlefield demands." "Morrison abused recruits, sir. There's a difference between challenging training and criminal behavior." "According to you. According to your rigged evaluation that was designed to make him fail." Blackwood's voice rose. "You think I don't know what Operation Integrity Forge really is? It's a purge. A way to remove anyone who doesn't conform to your new, soft vision of special operations." "The data suggests otherwise, sir." "The data." Blackwood spat the word like it was poison. "I've spent 28 years in special operations. I've led men in combat on 4 continents. I've earned 3 Silver Stars and a Distinguished Service Cross. And you're going to lecture me about data?" "No, sir. I'm going to do my job, whatever that job is." Blackwood smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "Your job is staff officer for administrative coordination. You'll be processing paperwork, scheduling training exercises, and staying the hell out of my operator's way. You will not evaluate anyone. You will not interview anyone. You will not conduct any investigations. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." "Good. Dismissed." Maya saluted, even though Blackwood didn't return it. As she left his office, she felt the weight of every operator's stare. They all knew who she was, what she'd done, and they all wondered whose career she'd destroy next. The next 3 weeks were subtle warfare. Blackwood assigned her meaningless tasks, filing reports that no one would read, attending meetings where her input was ignored, organizing equipment inventories that had been completed the week before. He was trying to bore her into quitting, to prove she couldn't handle being marginalized. But Maya had endured worse. She'd spent 3 weeks being humiliated by Morrison. She could handle Blackwood's passive aggression. What she couldn't ignore was what she was observing. 7th Group ran training exercises 3 times a week. Maya watched from the sidelines, taking notes that looked like administrative observations, but were actually documentation. She saw instructors who pushed operators hard, but fairly. She saw team leaders who demanded excellence without resorting to abuse. And she saw others, the ones who'd learned from Blackwood's example, who crossed lines that made her jaw tighten. Captain Trevor Walsh was the worst. 34 years old, 2 combat tours, Blackwood's protege and likely successor. He ran close-quarters combat training the way Morrison had, with unnecessary violence, with humiliation for anyone who struggled, with a culture of fear that he mistook for respect. Maya documented everything. Every excessive takedown, every demeaning comment, every time Walsh made operators hold stress positions as punishment rather than training. She built her case carefully, methodically, knowing that Blackwood was watching for any excuse to discredit her. Meanwhile, across 3 different bases, Reeves, Ortega, and Washington were conducting their own observations. Ortega's first week in Okinawa was disorienting. Her team leader, Captain Marcus Ford, was nothing like Morrison. He was demanding but encouraging. He corrected mistakes without humiliation. He pushed his operators to their limits but never beyond their breaking point. For the first time, Sophia saw what ethical leadership actually looked like in practice. "You good, Ortega?" Ford asked after a particularly brutal training exercise. "Yes, sir, just adjusting." "I know our reputation. Heard we're hard asses." Ford smiled slightly. "But there's a difference between hard and cruel. We're here to build operators who can think under pressure, not just follow orders. That takes a different approach." Sophia wanted to tell him everything, wanted to say that he was exactly the kind of leader the Marine Corps needed more of. But her orders were clear. Observe, document, report, nothing more. Still, she filed her first evaluation with genuine optimism. Ford was proof that reform could work, that demanding excellence and treating people with dignity weren't mutually exclusive. Washington's experience at Camp Lejeune was more complicated. His team leader, Master Sergeant Ray Wilson, was old school in the best and worst ways. He expected perfection, tolerated no excuses, and trained with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. But he also cared about his operators in ways that Morrison never had. "Washington, you're favoring your left knee," Wilson said after a ruck march. "Get it looked at before it becomes a real problem." "It's fine, Sergeant." "It's not fine, and I'm not asking. You're useless to the team if you blow out your knee trying to tough it out." Medical. Today. Derek found himself confused. Wilson was harsh, critical, uncompromising. But he was those things because he wanted his team to survive, not because he enjoyed making them suffer. The line between challenging leadership and toxic leadership was thinner than Derek had expected. His reports reflected that complexity. Wilson pushed boundaries, but he didn't cross them. He was demanding, but not abusive. It was the kind of nuanced evaluation that made Derek understand why Maya had chosen him for this assignment. Reeves had the hardest assignment. 1st Special Operations Battalion was under investigation for a reason. His commander, Major Peter Griggs, ran the unit with an iron fist and a mean streak. But unlike Morrison, Griggs was smart, careful. He never left obvious evidence of abuse. Instead, he created a culture where operators policed themselves, where the weak were driven out not by instructors, but by their own teammates, where hazing was called tradition, and anyone who complained was labeled soft. James watched it happen to a new operator named Tommy Chen, no relation to Maya. 22 years old, fresh from training, eager to prove himself. The team isolated him, made him the target of increasingly cruel pranks, excluded him from essential information that made him fail at tasks he should have succeeded at. "Why don't you speak up?" James asked Tommy one night after a particularly brutal hazing session. "Because then I'm out," Tommy replied quietly. "You speak up here, you're done. And I've wanted to be an operator my whole life. I can handle it." But James could see that Tommy couldn't handle it, could see the same deterioration he'd witnessed in Daniel Price, could see a young Marine slowly breaking under pressure that shouldn't exist. He filed his report that night, marked it urgent, knew that it would trigger an investigation that would blow his cover. Did it anyway, because some things mattered more than the mission. Back at 7th Group, Maya's investigation was interrupted by news that made her blood run cold. Blackwood had accepted an invitation to testify before Congress about political interference in military training. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out, and he was bringing allies, retired generals, conservative commentators, even Morrison himself. "This is it," General Hawkins told Maya over a secure line. "This is where we prove Operation Integrity Forge isn't a political witch hunt. We need evidence, comprehensive, undeniable evidence." "I'm working on it, General, but Blackwood's kept me isolated. I haven't had access to training records, personnel files, or then get access, whatever it takes." Maya knew what that meant. Breaking protocol, taking risks, potentially ending her career if she was caught. But she also knew what was at stake. If Blackwood won this fight, if he convinced Congress that reform training was weakening the military, everything they'd worked for would collapse. That night, Maya stayed late at headquarters, waited until the building was nearly empty. Then she used her clearance, technically legitimate, practically forbidden, to access 7th Group's training records for the past 5 years. What she found made her sick. 14 operators medically retired due to injuries sustained in training. Injuries that should never have happened. Broken bones from excessive force. Concussions from unnecessary head strikes. One operator partially paralyzed from a training accident that the report called unavoidable, but the incident description clearly showed was caused by instructor negligence. 23 operators who'd filed harassment or abuse complaints, all dismissed as personality conflicts or failure to adapt to military culture. None investigated properly, none resulting in consequences for the accused instructors. 4 suicide attempts, 2 successful. Both operators had left notes describing unbearable pressure, constant humiliation, and a command climate that made them feel worthless. Maya copied everything, encrypted it, sent it to Hawkins through secure channels. Then she erased her digital footprint and went home, knowing that if Blackwood discovered what she'd done, he'd have grounds to court-martial her for unauthorized access. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Captain Mendoza showed up at her quarters at 0530. "We need to talk, somewhere secure." They drove 20 minutes to a park off base, walked until they were certain no one was listening. "Reeves's cover is blown," Mendoza said without preamble. He filed an urgent report about hazing at 1st Battalion. The investigation triggered alarms. Griggs figured out someone was feeding information to the Inspector General's office. He's narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. Reeves is one of them. Pull him out. Can't. Not yet. If we pull him now, it confirms Griggs's suspicions and gives Blackwood ammunition for the congressional hearing. He'll say we're running a spy network instead of conducting legitimate evaluations. "So we leave James in danger to protect optics?" Maya's voice was sharp. "We leave James in place until after the hearing. 3 weeks. Then we extract all 3 of them and move to the next phase." Mendoza met her eyes. "He knew the risks, Maya. They all did." "That doesn't make it okay." "No, but it makes it necessary." Maya wanted to argue, wanted to pull rank and order Reeves extracted immediately, but she knew Mendoza was right. They were playing a long game, and sometimes that meant accepting short-term risks for long-term victory. Still, it sat heavy on her conscience. 2 weeks before the congressional hearing, Blackwood called Maya into his office. This time he was smiling. That was somehow worse than his usual contempt. "I wanted to inform you personally," he said, voice dripping false courtesy. "I've been called to testify before the House Armed Services Committee about Operation Integrity Forge. They're very interested in how political agendas are compromising military readiness." "I'm aware, sir. Are you also aware that I've subpoenaed your complete operational record? Every mission, every evaluation, every classified detail of your time in Delta Force." Maya's stomach dropped. Her record was supposed to remain classified. If Blackwood made it public, "That's illegal, sir. Those operations are still classified." "I have allies who disagree. They think the American people deserve to know whether the officer destroying Marines' careers has actually earned the right to judge them." Blackwood leaned forward. "How many confirmed kills do you have, Lieutenant Colonel? How many missions have you led? Because from where I'm sitting, you've spent more time in bureaucratic positions than operational ones." It was a trap. If Maya defended her record, she'd be forced to declassify information that could endanger ongoing operations. If she stayed silent, Blackwood would paint her as unqualified, a political appointee with no real combat experience. "My record speaks for itself, sir." "Does it? Because I've heard rumors, unconfirmed of course, but interesting." Blackwood's smile widened. Rumors that your Distinguished Service Cross was awarded for a mission that didn't actually happen, that your combat record has been enhanced to justify your positions. That's a lie. Maya's voice was cold. Is it? Then prove it. Testify. Share your record with Congress and the American people. Show us all why we should trust your judgment over Morrison's. Over mine. You know I can't do that. Then I guess we'll never know the truth, will we? Blackwood stood, signaling the meeting was over. See you at the hearing, Lieutenant Colonel. Should be quite the show. After she left, Maya sat in her car for 20 minutes, hands shaking. Blackwood had outmaneuvered her. If she couldn't defend her credentials without compromising classified operations, he'd destroy her credibility. And without her credibility, Operation Integrity Forge would be dismissed as the work of an unqualified idealist who didn't understand real military operations. She called Hawkins immediately. He's going to attack my record, say it's fabricated to justify my position. Let him try. Hawkins' voice was calm. I've already spoken to the Secretary of Defense. He's authorized partial declassification of your record. Not the operational details, but enough to prove your credentials are real. How much? Enough to show that you've led 47 successful direct action missions, that you earned 3 Silver Stars through actions witnessed by multiple operators, that you were the first female operator in Delta's operational detachment and earned that position through performance, not politics. Maya felt some of the tension ease. That'll help. It'll do more than help, because we're not just defending you, Maya, we're putting Morrison and Blackwood on trial. And the evidence you sent me, the training injuries, the dismissed complaints, the suicide notes, that's going to be very difficult for them to explain. The night before the hearing, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay awake thinking about Daniel Price, about Tommy Chen, about all the operators broken by leaders who mistook cruelty for strength, thinking about her father, who taught her that true warriors protect rather than dominate, thinking about Reeves, Ortega, and Washington, who were risking everything to help build something better. She thought about Morrison's face when he'd been grinding her into the dirt, certain of his power, certain she was nothing. And she thought about how his certainty had been his undoing. Tomorrow, Blackwood would face the same revelation. He just didn't know it yet. The congressional hearing room was packed. Media, spectators, military brass in dress uniforms, protesters outside with signs reading, "Support our warriors," and "Stop the witch hunt." Blackwood testified first. He was polished, articulate, and compelling. He spoke about the realities of combat, about the necessity of hard training, about the danger of letting political agendas compromise military effectiveness. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison is a good Marine who made hard choices, Blackwood said earnestly. He pushed recruits because that's what they needed. And now his career is destroyed because one officer with an agenda decided to play dress-up and entrap him. Congresswoman Sarah Martinez, a former Army officer herself, leaned forward. Colonel Blackwood, are you suggesting that documented abuse, including injuries, suicide attempts, and dismissed complaints, should be excused because the training was hard? I'm suggesting that special operations isn't for everyone. Some people can't handle the pressure. That's not the instructor's fault. What about recruit Daniel Price, who attempted suicide after Sergeant Morrison told him to kill himself? Price was mentally unstable. He never should have been accepted into the program. He passed every psychological evaluation before meeting Sergeant Morrison. Blackwood's expression hardened. Combat requires toughness. We can't water down our training because of isolated incidents. 14 medical retirements in 5 years is isolated? It's the cost of excellence. Then it was Maya's turn. She walked to the witness table in her dress uniform, ribbons on her chest, oak leaves gleaming on her collar. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. She sat, adjusted the microphone, and met the committee's gaze without flinching. Lieutenant Colonel Chen, Martinez began. Colonel Blackwood has suggested your credentials are insufficient to judge instructors like Sergeant Morrison. Would you care to respond? My record has been partially declassified for this hearing. Maya slid a folder across the table. In summary, 47 successful direct action missions over 11 combat deployments. 3 silver stars for valor in combat. 2 bronze stars with V device. Distinguished Service Cross for actions in Somalia that resulted in the successful extraction of 12 American hostages. The room went silent as committee members reviewed the documents. I was the first female operator selected for Delta Force's operational detachment, Maya continued. I earned that position not through politics or quotas, but by outperforming 63 male candidates in selection. I've led teams in combat, I've made life and death decisions under fire, and I've seen what happens when operators are trained to value aggression over judgment. Can you elaborate? Martinez asked. Maya pulled out more files. Mission failure rates. Units trained under reform protocols versus units trained under traditional methods. The data is clear. Ethical, psychologically intelligent leadership produces operators who succeed in complex environments. Traditional warrior culture training produces operators who excel at violence but fail at adaptation. That's cherry-picked data, Blackwood shouted from his seat. It's 3 years of comprehensive analysis, Maya replied calmly, conducted across multiple commands, multiple scenarios, controlling for all variables. The correlation is undeniable. She pulled out more documents. These are statements from former recruits. Daniel Price, who attempted suicide. Marcus Riley, who was medically retired after an instructor broke his arm during training. Jennifer Adams, who was sexually harassed and told to quit if she couldn't handle it. Congressman James Ford, a known Blackwood ally, interrupted. With respect, Lieutenant Colonel, shouldn't special operations be hard? Shouldn't we push people to their limits? Absolutely, Maya agreed. Push them to their limits, challenge them, make them stronger. But there's a difference between challenging training and criminal abuse. Between building resilience and breaking spirits. Between creating warriors and creating damaged people with weapon skills. She leaned forward, her voice carrying conviction. Special operations needs the best, but the best isn't measured only by physical capability or aggression. It's measured by judgment, restraint, moral courage. The ability to choose violence when necessary, but to recognize when it's counterproductive. Operators trained under reform protocols demonstrate all of these qualities. Operators trained by instructors like Morrison demonstrate only some of them. Martinez asked the question Maya had been waiting for. What would you say to those who claim Operation Integrity Forge is an attack on military tradition? I'd say that tradition only deserves respect if it's worth preserving. And a tradition of abuse, of breaking people unnecessarily, of confusing cruelty with strength, that's not military tradition. That's institutional failure that we've tolerated for too long. Maya looked directly at Blackwood. My father, Colonel Marcus Chen, was one of the finest special operators this country ever produced. He taught me that true strength protects, that power without compassion becomes tyranny, that the strongest warriors are those who can rise from the dirt with their humanity intact. That's the tradition worth preserving, not the one that produced 14 medical retirements, 4 suicide attempts, and countless operators who are physically capable but ethically compromised. The hearing continued for another 3 hours. Blackwood brought character witnesses who praised Morrison. Maya presented data showing systemic failures. Congressmen argued. Protesters shouted. Media commentators declared victory for both sides. But when it ended, Maya knew they'd won something important. Not complete victory. Blackwood still had allies, and the fight was far from over. But they'd shifted the narrative. Proven that reform wasn't about feelings or politics. It was about effectiveness, about creating operators who could think as well as fight, about holding leaders accountable for how they use their power. As Maya left the building, a young Marine approached her. fresh-faced, nervous, probably 22. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you. I washed out of special operations last year because my instructor said I was too weak. But I wasn't weak. I just wouldn't participate in hazing a teammate, and he made sure I failed after that." Maya put a hand on his shoulder. "What's your name, Marine?" "Garcia, ma'am." "Well, Garcia, you made the right choice. Protecting your teammate took more courage than anything that instructor asked you to do. That's the kind of operator we actually need. Do you think things will really change, ma'am?" Maya thought about Reeves, still undercover, his identity compromised. About Ortega and Washington, documenting leadership in their units. About all the work still to be done. "I think we're going to try," she said finally. "And sometimes trying is enough to shift the momentum." That night, Hawkins called with news. The Secretary of Defense is authorizing full implementation of Operation Integrity Forge reforms across all Special Operations commands. Blackwood's being reassigned. Morrison's court-martial is proceeding, and you, Lieutenant Colonel Chen, are being promoted to full colonel and given command of Special Operations Training Command. Maya should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt exhausted. They'd won this battle, but the war, the real war to change a culture that had been broken for decades, was just beginning. What about Reeves, Ortega, and Washington? Extract them next week. They've done their jobs. Now it's time to bring them home. After hanging up, Maya stood at her window, looking out at the base. Somewhere out there, instructors were training operators. Some were doing it right. Others were perpetuating the same toxic patterns that had almost destroyed Daniel Price, that had broken countless others. But now, finally, there would be consequences. There would be oversight. There would be standards that valued ethical judgment as highly as physical capability. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete, but it was progress, and sometimes progress was enough. The extraction order came at 0200. Reeves was asleep when his phone buzzed with the encrypted message, "Exfil authorized. Rendezvous Point Charlie, 48 hours." He stared at the screen, relief and guilt warring in his chest. Relief because Major Griggs was getting closer to identifying him. Guilt because Tommy Chen was still there, still enduring the hazing that James had documented, but couldn't stop. He found Tommy in the common area the next morning, alone as usual. The kid looked worse, darker circles under his eyes, weight loss, that 1,000-yard stare James had seen in combat veterans. "You holding up?" James asked quietly. Tommy glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Does it matter? I either quit or I endure. Those are my options. There's a third option, report it." "To who? Griggs? He's the one who created this culture." Tommy's laugh was bitter. "No, I just need to survive 6 more months. Then I rotate out and it's someone else's problem." James wanted to tell him everything, wanted to say that help was coming, that the investigation he'd triggered would bring consequences, that Tommy wouldn't have to endure 6 more months. But his orders were clear. Maintain cover until extraction. Say nothing. Just hang on was all he could offer. Things change. "Not here they don't." Tommy stood, headed toward the door. "But thanks for caring, Reeves. You're one of the good ones." James watched him go, feeling like he'd failed somehow. Success would be measured in institutional reform, in policy changes, in cultural transformation. But for Tommy Chen, right now, none of that mattered. He was still alone, still suffering, still convinced no one cared enough to intervene. 48 hours later, James was on a transport back to Washington. His cover story was family emergency. His actual destination was a debriefing room where Maya and General Hawkins waited. "Welcome home, Corporal," Maya said. Then, surprising him, she pulled him into a brief hug. "You did good work." "Didn't feel like it, ma'am. Tommy Chen is still there." "Not for long," Hawkins interjected. "Your report triggered a full investigation. We moved fast because you flagged it as urgent. Inspector General's office descended on 1st Battalion yesterday. Griggs has been relieved of command pending court-martial. Every operator you identified as participating in hazing is being interviewed separately. Tommy Chen has been transferred to a different unit with full protection from retaliation. James felt something unclench in his chest. He's okay? He's safe, thanks to you. Maya handed him a tablet. Your observations documented a pattern of systemic abuse that went back 4 years. 16 operators were driven out through hazing that was never properly investigated. You gave us the evidence we needed to prove it wasn't isolated incidents. It was command climate. What happens now? Now, you rest for 2 weeks. Then you report to me at Special Operations Training Command. You're going to help train the next generation of instructors in how to push operators without breaking them. Me? Ma'am, I'm just a corpsman. You're a Marine who had the courage to blow your cover to protect another operator, Maya corrected. That's exactly who we need teaching others what ethical leadership looks like. Ortega's extraction was cleaner. She'd spent 6 months observing Captain Ford's leadership, documenting his methods, learning from his example. Her final report was a blueprint for effective command: how to maintain high standards while treating operators with dignity, how to correct mistakes without humiliation, how to build teams through trust rather than fear. You were lucky, Maya told her during debriefing. Ford is exactly the kind of leader we want more of. It wasn't luck, ma'am. You placed me with him deliberately, wanted me to see that it's possible. And did you? See that it's possible? Sophia nodded. I did, but I also saw how rare it is. Ford's operators worshipped him because he earned their respect, not demanded it. But the other companies? They looked at Ford like he was soft. They didn't understand that his team consistently outperformed theirs because they wanted to succeed for him, not because they were afraid of failing. That's the culture we're changing, Maya said, one leader at a time. Washington's experience had been the most complicated. Master Sergeant Wilson was neither hero nor villain. He was something in between. Demanding, sometimes harsh, but ultimately motivated by genuine care for his team's survival. I don't know what to make of Wilson, Derek admitted during his debrief. He pushed us to the breaking point, but he never broke anyone. He was critical, but never cruel. He expected perfection, but he also checked on us when we were injured, made sure we were eating, noticed when someone was struggling mentally. That's good leadership, Maya said, the kind that challenges people without destroying them. But where's the line? How do we codify that? How do we write regulations that distinguish between Wilson's approach and Morrison's? Maya leaned back, considering. That's the question we've been wrestling with since this started. And the truth is there's no perfect formula. Leadership requires judgment. What we can do is train people to recognize when they've crossed from challenging to abusive, give them tools to self-correct, and create systems where operators can report abuse without fear of retaliation. That's not very satisfying, ma'am. No, but it's honest. Maya met his eyes. The goal isn't to eliminate tough training. It's to eliminate training that confuses cruelty with toughness. You saw the difference with Wilson. Trust that others can learn to see it too. The 3 of them were reunited at Special Operations Training Command 2 weeks later. Maya had been given a mandate to reform training across all Special Operations Forces: Marine Raiders, Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, Air Force Special Tactics. The scope was massive. The resistance was immediate. They're calling us the Thought Police, Mendoza reported at their first planning meeting. Social justice warriors, PC enforcers. The pushback is organized and well-funded. Of course it is, Maya replied. We're threatening people who built their careers on the old system. They're not going to surrender quietly. What's the strategy? We prove them wrong. We implement reform training protocols, measure the results, and show that our operators outperform traditionally trained ones in every metric that matters. And if we can't prove that, Then we were wrong, and we adjust. Maya's voice was firm. But I don't think we're wrong. Every piece of data we've collected supports the same conclusion. Ethical leadership produces better operators. We just need to demonstrate it conclusively. The demonstration came sooner than expected. 6 months after the congressional hearing, a crisis erupted in East Africa. A missionary compound near the Somali border was seized by militants affiliated with al-Shabaab. 37 American civilians taken hostage. Demands for prisoner release. A 72-hour deadline before executions began. The mission was assigned to Marine Special Operations Team 8241, one of the first units to complete Maya's reform training program. The team leader was Captain Sofia Ortega, promoted after exemplary performance and assigned to one of the most challenging posts in the Corps. Maya wasn't allowed on the mission, too senior, too valuable, too much of a political target if something went wrong. Instead, she watched from the operations center alongside General Hawkins, Mendoza, and a collection of brass who were waiting for the reform training to fail. Among them was Colonel Blackwood, recently reassigned but still wielding influence, still convinced that Maya's approach would get operators killed. "This is your moment of truth, Chen," Blackwood said quietly as they watched the operation prep. Ortega's team is walking into a complex urban environment with civilians in immediate danger. Traditional training would have them ready for aggressive action. "Your training?" He shook his head. "Let's see if restraint gets those hostages home alive." Maya said nothing, just watched as Ortega's team loaded into helicopters. The operation unfolded over 8 hours. Maya listened to radio chatter, watched drone feeds, tracked team positions. Ortega's approach was methodical, precise, patient. Where traditionally trained operators might have breached immediately with overwhelming force, Ortega spent 2 hours gathering intelligence, identifying hostile positions, planning multiple contingencies. "She's wasting time," Blackwood muttered. "Every minute increases risk to hostages." But Maya saw something else. She saw a team leader who was thinking, not just reacting, who understood that speed without intelligence led to civilian casualties, who valued getting it right over getting it done fast. When Ortega finally gave the order to breach, it was surgical. Her team moved through the compound with practiced efficiency, neutralizing threats without causing panic, securing hostages without traumatizing them further, capturing 3 high-value targets alive for intelligence exploitation. 0 civilian casualties, 0 friendly casualties. Mission success in every measurable way. The operations center erupted in controlled celebration. Maya allowed herself a small smile. Hawkins squeezed her shoulder briefly. Blackwood stood abruptly and left without a word. "He'll never admit you were right," Mendoza said softly. "Don't need him to admit it," Maya replied. "Just need everyone else to see the results." The results spoke for themselves over the following months. Teams trained under reform protocols consistently outperformed traditionally trained units in complex scenarios. They had fewer civilian casualties, better intelligence collection, higher hostage survival rates, and improved mission adaptability. But success came with costs. 3 instructors were relieved of duty for reverting to abusive methods. 5 operators filed complaints about commanders who resisted the new standards. And in one tragic case, an operator trained under the old system made a catastrophic decision in Afghanistan that resulted in 4 civilian deaths and an international incident. Maya read the after-action report with a heavy heart. The operator, Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, had been trained to prioritize aggression over judgment. When faced with an ambiguous situation, armed men in a compound who might be hostiles or might be security guards, he'd chosen violence. It was the wrong choice. 4 innocent people died because Torres had been taught to shoot first and question later. "This is exactly what we're trying to prevent," Maya told her team during a review meeting. Torres wasn't a bad operator. He was a product of bad training. He did what he'd been taught to do. And people died because we failed to teach him when not to pull the trigger. Blackwood's people are using this against us, Mendoza warned. They're saying Torres hesitated because of reform training, that he second-guessed himself because we made him soft. That's a lie, and they know it. Torres didn't hesitate. He acted immediately. That was the problem. He was trained to default to violence, not to think critically about whether violence was appropriate. How do we counter that narrative? With truth. Maya pulled up Torres's training records. Show that he was trained under traditional protocols, not reformed ones. Show that operators like Ortega, who completed reform training, made better decisions in similar situations. Show that thinking isn't weakness. It's the most important weapon an operator has. The public relations battle was exhausting. For every success story like Ortega's mission, critics found a complication or failure to exploit. For every piece of data supporting reform, opponents produced anecdotes about the good old days, when training was tough and operators were tougher. Maya found herself working 18-hour days, fighting battles on multiple fronts, implementing new training protocols, defending against political attacks, supporting instructors who were trying to change, removing ones who refused to adapt. 3 months into her tenure as commander of Special Operations Training Command, she hit a wall. Not physical exhaustion, though that was real enough. Emotional exhaustion. The weight of knowing that every decision she made affected real people's lives. That mistakes had consequences measured in broken careers or broken operators, or in Torres's case, broken families who'd lost loved ones. She drove to Arlington National Cemetery one Sunday afternoon, found her father's grave under an oak tree in Section 60. She hadn't visited in 2 years. Hadn't had time, she told herself, but really, she'd been avoiding it. Avoiding the conversation she needed to have. "I'm trying, Dad," she said quietly, kneeling beside the headstone. "I'm doing what you taught me, protecting instead of dominating, using strength for something other than destruction. But it's harder than I thought. They fight every change. They twist every success into failure. They make me question whether I'm actually helping or just making things more complicated." The wind rustled through the oak leaves. Somewhere nearby, a family was visiting another grave, their quiet voices carrying across the cemetery. "Torres made a mistake last week, killed 4 people who didn't need to die, and I keep thinking, if we'd gotten to him sooner, if we'd reformed his training before he deployed, maybe those people would still be alive. Maybe their families wouldn't be grieving. Maybe we could have saved them." She wiped her eyes, frustrated at the tears. "You always made it look easy, making the right call, knowing when to fight and when to show restraint. How did you do it? How did you carry the weight of all those decisions without breaking?" "He didn't." Maya spun around. General Hawkins stood a respectful distance away, holding flowers. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude, but I was visiting Marcus's grave anyway, and I saw you here." Hawkins moved closer, placed the flowers beside Maya's. "Your father was my mentor, did you know that? When I was a junior officer fighting to be taken seriously in a male-dominated force, he was one of the few who treated me like I belonged." "I didn't know that." "He didn't talk about it much. That wasn't his style." Hawkins sat on the grass, gestured for Maya to join her. "But I remember one conversation we had after a mission went wrong. Good men died because of a decision Marcus made. He was devastated, questioned everything. And I asked him the same question you just asked. How do you carry this weight? What did he say? He said you don't carry it alone. That leadership means accepting responsibility, but it doesn't mean shouldering every burden by yourself. He said the operators who break are the ones who think they have to be strong enough to handle everything. The ones who survive are those who lean on their team, who accept help, who understand that strength includes admitting when you need support. Maya absorbed that. "I've been trying to do this all by myself." "I know, and you're burning out because of it." Hawkins met her eyes. "Maya, what you're doing, reforming an entire culture, fighting institutional inertia, facing constant criticism, that's not a one-person job. Your father understood that. He built teams of people he trusted, delegated responsibilities, accepted that he couldn't fix everything personally. But you're responsible for leading the reform, not for personally solving every problem it creates. Hawkins' voice was gentle but firm. Reeves, Ortega, Washington, they're ready to do more. Mendoza is capable of handling operational details. I can run interference with political opposition. You need to trust us to carry our share of the weight. Maya looked back at her father's headstone. I'm afraid of failing him. You're afraid of being human, Hawkins corrected. Your father wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. He had moments of doubt. But he kept going because he believed the work mattered more than his ego. That's what you need to remember. This isn't about proving you're strong enough to do it alone. It's about building something that lasts beyond any one person. They sat in silence for a while. Two women who'd fought their way through systems designed to exclude them, who'd proven themselves again and again, who were tired but not defeated. Finally, Hawkins stood. Come on, let's get some coffee and figure out how to actually delegate some of your workload. Your father would be furious if he knew you were burning yourself out trying to be invincible. Maya smiled slightly. He would, wouldn't he? Absolutely. Marcus Chen believed in strength, but he also believed in sustainability. You can't change a culture if you collapse from exhaustion halfway through. As they walked back to Hawkins' car, Maya felt something shift inside her. The weight didn't disappear, but it felt more manageable. Shared among people she trusted instead of crushing down on her alone. The next week, she restructured her command team. Reeves took over instructor development, training people to recognize the difference between challenging standards and abusive methods. Ortega became the liaison to operational units, helping team leaders implement reform protocols in the field. Washington focused on curriculum development, codifying the lessons they'd learned into formal training materials. Mendoza handled the political fights, which freed Maya to focus on strategic planning. And Hawkins ran interference with senior leadership, protecting the reform initiative from those who wanted to dismantle it. It wasn't perfect. They still faced resistance. Critics still questioned their methods. Operators still made mistakes, though fewer and less catastrophic ones. But the trend was clear. Reform training was producing operators who thought as well as fought, who understood that strength included restraint, who made better decisions in complex environments. 6 months after Ortega's successful mission in East Africa, the Joint Chiefs requested a comprehensive briefing on Operation Integrity Forge results. Maya presented data showing improved mission success rates, reduced civilian casualties, better intelligence collection, and higher operator retention. People stayed in units led by ethical commanders, left units led by toxic ones. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Thomas Bradford, studied the data carefully. These results are compelling, Colonel Chen. But I have a question. What happens when we face an enemy who doesn't care about restraint, who uses our ethical considerations against us? Maya had expected this. Sir, ethical training doesn't mean weakness. Our operators are just as capable of violence as traditionally trained ones. They're just better at recognizing when violence is the appropriate response versus when it creates more problems than it solves. That's not weakness, that's tactical superiority. Can you prove that? We already have, sir. Captain Ortega's mission demonstrated that operators trained to think critically about force application succeeded where aggressive approaches would have failed. Staff Sergeant Torres's tragedy demonstrated what happens when operators default to violence without judgment. The data is clear. Bradford nodded slowly. All right, Colonel, you've made your case. I'm authorizing expansion of reform training protocols across all Special Operations commands. But, he held up a hand, this comes with accountability. If reformed training produces failures, we'll revisit this decision. Understood, sir, and accepted. As Maya left the briefing, Mendoza caught up with her. You realize what just happened? You got buy-in from the Joint Chiefs. That's legitimacy we couldn't have imagined a year ago. It's progress, Maya agreed, but it's not victory. Victory is when ethical leadership becomes so ingrained in our culture that we don't need oversight programs to enforce it, when doing the right thing is the default, not the exception. That could take years. Then we'd better get started, Maya smiled, because I'm not planning on stopping until ethical leadership is so normal that people forget there was ever a different way. That night, she returned to her father's grave one more time. This visit felt different, lighter, like she'd finally figured out how to carry the weight he'd left her. "We're doing it, Dad," she said quietly, "changing the culture, one leader at a time. It's slow, it's hard, but it's working, and I'm not doing it alone anymore. You taught me that strength protects, but you also taught me that true strength means knowing when to accept help. I'm finally learning that lesson." She touched the headstone, then stood to leave. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more resistance, more setbacks, but also more progress. More operators trained to lead with wisdom as well as strength. More teams that valued thinking as highly as fighting. The work wasn't finished, but for the first time since this all began, Maya believed it would be. And sometimes belief was enough to keep going. 1 year after that conversation at her father's grave, Maya stood in a different cemetery. This one was temporary, a collection of wooden crosses in American flags marking where Marines had fallen during a training accident at Fort Ironside. 3 dead, 7 injured, all because an instructor named Captain Ryan Hutchins had decided that reform training was making his operators soft. Hutchins had reverted to old methods: excessive force during hand-to-hand combat, dangerous live-fire exercises without proper safety protocols. And when one of his operators questioned the risks, Hutchins had made an example of him by increasing the danger even further. 3 Marines died in the resulting accident. The investigation was still ongoing, but preliminary findings pointed directly to Hutchins' reckless leadership. Maya knelt beside one of the crosses. Lance Corporal David Martinez, 23 years old, from Houston. He'd written a letter to his family 2 days before he died, saying he was worried about his instructor's methods, but afraid to report them because everyone would think he was weak. "I'm sorry," Maya whispered. "I'm so sorry we didn't get to you in time." "It's not your fault." Reeves stood behind her, having followed her here. "Hutchins made those choices, not you. I created a system that was supposed to prevent this, and 3 Marines are dead anyway." "You created a system that saved hundreds of others," Reeves corrected gently. "You can't prevent every tragedy, ma'am. You can only keep trying to make things better." Maya stood, wiped her eyes. "Hutchins was one of ours, went through reform training, certified by our instructors, and he still reverted to the old ways when he thought no one was watching. Which tells us the work isn't done, that we need better monitoring systems, better accountability, but it doesn't mean we were wrong to try." They walked back to the command vehicle where Mendoza was coordinating the investigation. The media had descended on Fort Ironside like vultures, ready to declare reform training a failure. Blackwood had already given 3 interviews saying this proved his point, that softer training created instructors who overcorrected by being too harsh when challenged. "It's backwards logic," Maya said angrily after watching one of Blackwood's interviews. "Hutchins didn't fail because of reform training. He failed because he rejected it." "Doesn't matter," Mendoza replied. "The narrative is already set. Reform training claims 3 lives. That's the headline. That's what people will remember. Then we change the narrative." "How?" Maya thought for a moment. "By showing that this wasn't a failure of reform training, it was a failure of implementation. Hutchins completed the program, but he never internalized its principles. We need to prove that operators who truly embrace ethical leadership don't make these mistakes." That's a tough sell right now. Then we'd better get convincing. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 3 weeks after the Fort Ironside tragedy, militants attacked a remote forward operating base in Syria. 12 Americans trapped, heavily outnumbered, with enemy forces closing in. The rescue mission required precision, speed, and the ability to distinguish between combatants and civilians in a chaotic urban environment. The mission went to Marine Special Operations Team 8241, Sofia Ortega's unit, the same team that had succeeded brilliantly in East Africa. But this mission was different, higher stakes, more complicated, and the entire military establishment watching to see whether reform training could handle a real crisis, or whether Blackwood had been right all along. Maya wasn't supposed to be in the operations center for this mission. Too personal, too much invested. But General Hawkins called her anyway. "You need to see this," Hawkins said simply. Maya arrived to find the center packed, Joint Chiefs representatives, congressional observers, media liaisons, and Colonel Blackwood standing in the corner with an expression that said he was waiting for vindication. The operation unfolded over 6 hours. Ortega's team inserted under fire, fought through hostile territory, reached the besieged Americans, and began the extraction. Traditional tactics would have been straightforward: overwhelming force, aggressive action, evacuate, and leave. But Ortega made a different call. She identified civilians trapped in the crossfire, families caught between the Marines and the militants. Traditional rules of engagement would have classified them as acceptable collateral damage. Ortega refused to accept that. "We're not leaving them," her voice came through the radio, calm despite the chaos around her. "These people didn't choose to be here. We did." "Captain, you don't have the resources to extract civilians," the mission commander argued. "Complete your primary objective." "Sir, with respect, these people will die if we leave them. That's not acceptable." Maya held her breath. Ortega was going off script, making a call that could cost her career if it went wrong. But it was exactly the kind of call reform training was designed to produce. Ethical judgment under pressure, refusing to sacrifice innocent lives for operational convenience. Ortega's team adapted brilliantly. They secured the Americans, established a perimeter that protected the civilians, and held that position while negotiating a ceasefire with local elders who had influence over the militants. It took 4 hours longer than a traditional extraction would have. 4 hours when anything could have gone wrong. But nothing did. Ortega's team brought home all 12 Americans and successfully evacuated 37 Syrian civilians who would have been killed in the crossfire. 0 American casualties, 0 civilian casualties. Mission success that went beyond the original parameters. The operations center erupted in restrained celebration. Maya felt tears on her cheeks and didn't bother to hide them. Hawkins squeezed her shoulder. Mendoza was grinning. Blackwood left without a word. "He'll say it was luck," Mendoza predicted. "That Ortega got lucky and it won't work next time." "Let him say whatever he wants," Maya replied. "The results speak for themselves. Ortega made the ethical choice and the tactical choice. Those aren't separate things. They're the same thing. That's what reform training teaches. And that's what just saved 49 lives." The media coverage shifted dramatically. Stories about Fort Ironside's tragedy were replaced by stories about Ortega's heroism. Congress requested a follow-up briefing. The Secretary of Defense issued a statement praising the new generation of special operations leadership. But Maya knew better than to declare victory. Hutchins' failure proved that cultural change was fragile, that even operators who completed reform training could revert to old patterns under pressure. They needed to go deeper, build something more sustainable. She called a meeting with her core team, Reeves, Ortega, Washington, and Mendoza. "Ortega's mission bought us time and credibility. Now we need to use both. We need to take reform training from a program to a culture, from something we teach to something people believe." "How?" Washington asked. "By making ethical leadership the default at every level. New operators learn it from their first day. Mid-level leaders model it consistently. Senior commanders enforce it through their own behavior. We create an environment where the Hutchins of the world stand out immediately because they're acting counter to established norms. That's generational work, Reeves said. We're talking decades. Then we'd better get started. Maya pulled up a proposal she'd been working on. I want to create a permanent oversight body, not punishment-focused, development-focused. Operators at every level get regular evaluation, not just on tactical skills, but on ethical decision-making. Leaders who demonstrate exceptional character get accelerated promotion. Those who show warning signs get intervention before they become another Hutchins. The old guard will fight this, Mendoza warned. The old guard is dying out, Maya replied. Blackwood is retiring next year. Morrison was court-martialed. Griggs is facing prison time. The toxic leaders who built their careers on the old system are being replaced. We need to make sure their replacements are people who actually believe in what we're teaching. Over the next 6 months, they built that system. Comprehensive evaluation protocols, leadership development programs that emphasized ethical decision-making as much as tactical skills, mentorship structures that paired junior operators with leaders who embodied the values they wanted to instill. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks. 2 instructors were relieved for abusive behavior. 1 unit commander resigned rather than adapt to new standards. And in 1 painful case, an operator Maya had personally certified made a catastrophic judgment error that resulted in civilian casualties. Each failure hurt. Each one made Maya question whether they were doing enough, moving fast enough, getting it right. But each failure also taught them something, showed them where the system needed strengthening, where training needed adjustment, where oversight needed to be more responsive. And slowly, measurably, things improved. Complaint rates dropped. Retention rates increased. Mission success rates climbed. Operators trained under reformed protocols consistently outperformed traditionally trained ones in complex scenarios. 2 years after Maya had been ground face first into the dirt by Morrison, she returned to Fort Ironside for a different ceremony. The graduation of the first class to complete the fully reformed Special Reconnaissance Training Program. 52 recruits who'd been challenged relentlessly but never abused, who'd been pushed to their limits but never broken unnecessarily, who understood that true strength included, rather than excluded, judgment and compassion. Maya stood at the reviewing stand as General Hawkins presided over the ceremony. She watched the new operators receive their qualifications, saw the pride in their faces, the confidence that came from knowing they'd earned their place through genuine merit rather than surviving abuse. After the ceremony, Maya walked alone to the training yard where Morrison had humiliated her, the place where this whole journey had really begun. She stood in the exact spot where she'd been pressed face down in the dirt, remembering the humiliation, the pain, the absolute certainty Morrison had that she was nothing. "Ma'am?" She turned. 3 of the new graduates stood nearby, 2 men and a woman, all looking at her with expressions of respect and curiosity. "We wanted to thank you," the woman said. "I'm Lieutenant Kara Stevens. This is Lieutenant Marcus Webb and Lieutenant Jason Torres." Torres. Maya's heart clenched. "Any relation to Staff Sergeant Michael Torres?" Jason nodded, his expression complicated. "He was my brother. He died in that incident in Afghanistan. The one where he couldn't finish." "I know," Maya said softly. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You didn't kill those people. Michael did. Because he was trained wrong. Because someone taught him that violence was always the answer." Jason's voice was steady, despite the emotion in his eyes. "That's why I'm here. I want to make sure no one else gets trained the way my brother was. I want to be the kind of leader who teaches people to think before they shoot." Maya felt tears threatening and didn't fight them. "Your brother wasn't a bad person, Jason. He was failed by a system that didn't prepare him for the decisions he'd have to make. We're trying to fix that, but it won't bring him back, or the people he killed. I wish I could change that." "You can't change the past," Jason agreed. But you can change the future. That's what you're doing. That's what matters. The three graduates saluted her, and Maya returned the gesture. As they walked away, she felt something shift inside her. The weight she'd been carrying, the guilt over every failure, every operator who'd been hurt despite her efforts, every victim of leaders she hadn't reached in time, didn't disappear, but it transformed into something else. Purpose, determination, the resolve to keep going because the work mattered more than her comfort. She returned to headquarters to find Hawkins waiting in her office. The general looked troubled. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything." Hawkins gestured to the window, toward the training yard. "I've been thinking about what happens next. You've built something remarkable here, Maya, but it's still fragile, still dependent on champions like you and me pushing it forward. What happens when we're gone?" "We make sure it doesn't depend on us," Maya replied. "We build it into the institution so deeply that it becomes self-sustaining. We promote people like Ortega and Washington and Reeves into positions of authority. We create systems that outlast any individual leader." "That's the right answer, but I wonder if it's enough." Hawkins sat down heavily. "I'm 63 years old. I've been fighting for reform my entire career. And I'm tired, Maya. I thought we'd won when the Joint Chiefs approved expansion, but Hutchins proved we're just at the beginning. This fight will outlast both of us. Then we make sure others are ready to continue it." Maya sat across from her mentor. "You asked me once what my father would think about what we're doing. I think he'd say that the most important battles are the ones that don't have clear endpoints. That true leadership means building something that doesn't require you to sustain it. We're not trying to fix this in our lifetimes, General. We're trying to start a transformation that our successors will complete." Hawkins smiled slightly. "When did you get so wise?" "I had good teachers. One of them is sitting across from me right now." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two warriors who'd fought their way through systems designed to exclude them, who'd proven themselves again and again, who were tired but not defeated. "There's something else," Hawkins said finally. "I've been offered a position at the Pentagon, overseeing special operations policy for all services. It's the opportunity to implement these reforms at the highest level. But it means leaving command, leaving you." "You should take it," Maya said immediately. "That's where this needs to go next. Institutional policy, not just Marine Corps, but joint service standards. You're the right person for that fight." "And who takes over here?" Maya knew what Hawkins was really asking. "You're recommending me for promotion to general. You've earned it, and you're the only person I trust to continue this work." "I'm 36 years old. I'd be the youngest general in the Corps." "Your father was 38 when he made general, and he earned it through merit, same as you." Hawkins leaned forward. "The question isn't whether you're qualified, Maya. It's whether you're ready for the fight that comes with that rank. Because it won't get easier. It'll get harder, more political, more complicated, more people depending on you to get it right." Maya thought about Daniel Price, about Tommy Chen, about Martinez and the others who died at Fort Ironside. Thought about Jason Torres, who joined the Marines to honor his brother by becoming the kind of leader Michael never had. Thought about all the operators, current and future, who deserve training that challenged them without breaking them. "I'm ready," she said, "not because I think I can do it perfectly, but because I understand now that perfect isn't the goal. Progress is the goal, and I'm willing to keep pushing for progress as long as it takes." 6 months later, Brigadier General Maya Chen stood in front of a new class of recruits at Fort Ironside, her first address as the youngest general in Marine Corps history. In the audience sat Reeves, Ortega, and Washington, all recently promoted, all assigned as her senior staff. Mendoza stood beside her as her chief of staff. And in the back row, Daniel Price sat in civilian clothes, now working as a consultant helping the Corps identify and prevent the kind of toxic leadership that had almost killed him. "You're here because you want to be special operators," Maya began. "Because you want to serve at the highest level, Because you want to be the best. I'm here to tell you what best actually means." She paused, let the silence build. "It doesn't mean being the toughest. It doesn't mean being the most aggressive. It doesn't mean dominating others. Being the best means having the judgment to know when to use your skills and when to show restraint. It means being strong enough to protect people, not just destroy enemies. It means understanding that power reveals character and making sure your character is something you can live with." She looked across the formation, making eye contact with recruit after recruit. "Some of you think I'm here to make training easier. You're wrong. I'm here to make it harder. Because I'm not just going to push your bodies, I'm going to challenge your minds, your ethics, your assumptions about what strength means. And when you graduate, you won't just be physically capable, you'll be mentally prepared to make the kinds of decisions that determine whether missions succeed or fail, whether innocent people live or die, whether you become the kind of leader people want to follow or the kind they're forced to obey." She gestured toward the training yard behind her. 2 years ago, I stood in that yard while an instructor ground my face into the dirt. He thought I was weak. He thought humiliation made him strong. He was wrong. The weak ones are those who need to dominate others to feel powerful. The strong ones are those who can choose violence but don't have to rely on it. Maya's voice grew stronger. "You will be challenged here. You will be pushed beyond what you think you can endure. You will fail and fall and bleed, but you will never be abused. You will never be humiliated. You will never be told that your worth as a human being depends on your physical performance. Because we're not building machines. We're building warriors who understand that true strength protects rather than destroys." She stood at attention, her voice carrying absolute conviction. "Some of you will quit. Some will fail. Some will realize this life isn't for you. That's okay. But those who make it through will understand something that generations of operators before you had to learn the hard way. The strongest warriors aren't those who never fall. They're the ones who rise from the dirt again and again with their humanity intact. That's what we're teaching here. That's what you'll become. Not just operators, not just fighters, but guardians who know that power without wisdom is just destruction, and that true leadership means knowing when strength requires compassion." As the recruits dispersed to begin their training, Maya remained standing in the yard where Morrison had tried to break her, where she'd endured 3 weeks of abuse to document his crimes, where she'd chosen to rise at exactly the right moment to prove that power reveals character. Hawkins approached, now in her Pentagon uniform, visiting from Washington. "That was quite a speech. Think it'll work?" "I think you gave them something to aspire to. The rest is up to them." Hawkins smiled. "Your father would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. Thank you for everything, for believing this was possible, for fighting beside me, for teaching me that I don't have to carry every burden alone. You've already surpassed anything I accomplished," Hawkins said. "Now keep going, keep pushing, keep proving that ethical leadership isn't weakness, it's the highest form of strength." After Hawkins left, Maya walked the training yard one more time, watching instructors work with recruits. She saw challenge without cruelty, correction without humiliation, standards maintained through inspiration rather than fear. It wasn't perfect, it would never be perfect, but it was better, measurably, provably better. And that was enough. Because strength didn't mean never falling. It meant rising again with your humanity intact. It meant using power to protect rather than dominate. It meant understanding that the true measure of a warrior wasn't how much damage they could inflict, but how much wisdom they brought to deciding when damage was necessary. Morrison had thrown her in the dirt, expecting her to break. Blackwood had tried to destroy her credibility. Hutchins had proved the work was never finished. And every day brought new challenges, new resistance, new people who confused cruelty with strength. But every day also brought new operators like Jason Torres, who joined because they understood that reform meant progress. New leaders like Ortega and Washington and Reeves, who were building the future one ethical decision at a time. New evidence that warriors who thought as well as fought were the ones who actually won the missions that mattered. Maya Chen had been tested by fire, humiliation, and doubt. She'd endured being underestimated, having her record questioned, watching people die because the system failed them. She'd carried weight that sometimes felt unbearable, but she'd never stopped rising. Never stopped believing that better was possible. Never stopped proving that true strength protects, and that the strongest among us are those who use their power to build rather than break. They'd thrown her in the dirt like trash, but she'd risen like a warrior who understood that character, not violence, was the ultimate measure of strength. And in rising, she'd changed everything.